Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Tuesday. It is February the 25th, and we have maybe the most salacious topic name of any Kyle Seraphin show ever. I'm not much for clickbait, guys. I just don't do it. But something about NSA sex chats and I have to read it correctly, top secret pervert party in the U.S. intel community. It kills me. What on earth are we dealing with here? We're dealing with the sickest, most ridiculous people on earth. And yeah, that's government employees. They felt entitled because of all of the insanity that's been going on. Let's call it the last 12 years. In the last 12 years, we've watched a steady march to normalize perverted nonsense, to socialize things that were never allowed in public. And in doing so, they've made people feel so comfortable in their job that they could spend time talking about their perversions on a top secret government enclave. That means the specific government network they were using. And so we have the TS SCI Perv party going on in what we call the USIC, the United States Intelligence Community. In order to get a proper read on this, as I was in counterintelligence for about 2 years, it certainly was not a profession. I didn't sign up to be an intel guy by any means. I've got a lifelong, very experienced intel analyst, commentator, FBI whistleblower, and one of your favorites, one of my favorites, George Hill. He's going to be joining me in just a minute because he's going to call in. He's actually just finished up at the gym. We started the day off and he called me and I'm like, hey man, what are you doing? What is that clinking steel in the background? I hear iron. And he's like, oh yeah, it's leg day. So George is probably done with leg day at the gym. He's going to dial into the program. We're going to get a live reaction from him about some of this insanity. And there's no other way to call it. It's just... This is what these people are scared of Doge uncovering. They went out there to go find where our money was, and they found out that everybody was playing hide the whatever you call it, hide the carrot. I don't have a good name for it. I couldn't think of a dirty thing on the fly that's not too dirty. Let's do something. Considering that the NSA and the intel communities are full of creepers, and government agencies may or may not have your best interest at heart, let's talk about my buddies over at Silent, shall we? Between the government, big tech, corporate America, criminals, perverts on top secret chats, your privacy could be compromised anytime, 24/7. There is no other option. You got to protect yourself, and that starts with Silent, SLNT. Their Faraday products block all incoming and outgoing signals. You know what that reminds me? I've got my phone sitting in the back of my pocket right now, so I'm going to actually put it in the sleeve that we keep here on the desk. Let's just put that sucker away so nobody calls me while I'm doing this. What it does, it's an invisible layer of protection, and it keeps you and your devices safe from the outside world. It keeps things from going in and from going out. Their backpacks, the phone sleeves, like you just saw, the pants, they have patented signal blocking technology that actually works. There are plenty of these things you can buy for cheaper, but they don't actually do what they're supposed to do. If you guys want to get something that's going to do the right thing, it's going to keep your data and your signals, your wireless signature in the world from getting into the wrong hands. You can place your device inside, close it up like I just did. You saw how quick it was. Go silent today at slnt.com/Kyle. Again, slnt.com/Kyle. You'll save 15% on any qualifying order. It's worth your time to look into these. My favorite is the E3 bag that you're seeing on the screen right now. It comes with 2 individual sleeves and a regular everyday backpack that doesn't scream hey, I'm a tactical cool guy that's trying to keep my stuff on the DL. Stay ahead, secure your own privacy today. You got to take control of it by going to silent.com/Kyle. Again, slnt.com/Kyle. Get 15% off. It comes out to $50 or $60 depending on the product you get. Definitely a cool option and something you guys get into. All right, let's get into today's program. All right, so as I was looking into this top secret pervert party, which you can't just say anything funnier than that, I pulled this back up again This is yesterday's original slide. Some of you guys that are just tuning in, maybe you skip past the ad. Shame on you. They pay for our program. But let's say you're one of those people that skips past the ad and you look at it and you see, oh my God, Donald Trump has cut government costs and it is putting the CIA's secrets at risk. Nobody realized what those secrets were going to actually be. Nobody knew that the secrets were going to be potentially top secret pervert party. And so in a great sense of humor, we're going to try to bring on and talk to my buddy, George Hill. George, are you on the line?
Hey, calling from a car phone.
From a car phone, buddy. I'm going to talk some Boston a little bit later because apparently Tom Homan's going to come and bring some justice to your city. Give people your background if you would.
Wait.
Yeah, will you give people quick the background, just kind of your intel bona fide so they can understand who we're talking to if they're new to the program?
Sure. 13 years active duty Marine Corps, trigger puller, specialist, took a 3-year break as a recruiter. 9 years in the sector, joined the Navy Reserves Intel program in January of 2000. 9/11 hit, got mobilized a number of times in support of that. I am a trained interrogator, battlefield and strategic interrogator, both overseas and in Guantanamo Bay. Got recruited by the National Security Agency in 2005. Spent 5 years there, find, fix, finish operations overseas, and then switched over to FBI in 2010, where I became the National Security Intelligence Supervisor, handling counterintelligence, cyber, and counterterrorism. And I was also the co-supervisor of the Boston Marathon Bombing Task Force. So seen a little bit.
Seen a little bit is a nice way of saying that. Today, we were discussing this morning. You want to talk about how you picked up the phone, decided to dial me before what? Before the sun rose here in Texas. It was before 6 a.m., I feel like.
I know, and I would be live, like, on a video feed, but today's day, which means it's a high holy day for real men. So I squeeze this in on a phone call. But so Tulsi Gabbard, the ODNI, Director of National Intelligence, retweeted Chris Rufo's report on these top secret chat rooms that are being used by various individuals to talk about transgender surgeries, polyamorous relationships, and other unsundry activities. And that's what I called it. This is done on a top secret enclave. So anybody from the FBI who is participating in this would have to be working one of those 3 national security programs that I just mentioned. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so the headline goes, and I think I pulled this from here. Let's pull it up here. This is Daily Mail reporting on it. Lurid sex chat among NSA agents exposes as Intel chief Tulsi Gabbard vows to punish workers for posting about their kinks, their fetishes, and polyamory. George, I referred to it as a top secret pervert party. How do you feel about that from what you've read?
It's kind of gross. Now, I mean, I've used those top secret chat rooms. I had a specific question, identified the chat that I wanted to enter, and it was a question, and I'm not giving away anything classified. It was about artificial intelligence being embedded in drones, making them essentially autonomous killing machines. And so I entered that into the chat room, and I got a lot of good answers back with some really good reporting. So that's what they're for. This is just like your cell phone in a bureau. This is for de minimis use. In other words, it's for official business only. So there's violation 1. Violation number 2 is that people are using these de minimis use, electronic capabilities to discuss things that are clearly not work related. They're all easily identifiable. You enter in with a, plain language name and what agency you're from. So these people are spending, I don't know how many hours in there talking about things that are not work related, which is what we saw the uproar coming out over Doge right now on that. So
let me read a couple of these.
Committing time card fraud.
Let me read a couple of them, then we'll get to the time card fraud nature of it. As you said, de minimis. So if people understand, you're allowed to use government resources for what's called de minimis, or of zero value or minimal value, just a negligible amount of things. If you need to say, hey, are we having lunch at 5:15? Or are we getting, are we all leaving today at this time because we're going to go play golf? You could say that on a chat and you wouldn't be out of line. In fact, the FBI actually pulled the chats between me and Garrett O'Boyle. You may not even know this, but they pulled the chats between me and Garrett O'Boyle before I was removed. And almost all of it was, hey, how you doing? How's your family going? Okay, good. Listen, when we're talking about going into a surveillance role, these are the things. And I was helping him critique like his essay that he was applying to the surveillance unit that we had out in Washington, D.C. So again, that doesn't even fall in de minimis because it's a work product. It's actually related to the thing. You're not supposed to be sitting there just gabbing away with your buddies about how great everything is or what you think. So let me read a few of these. You ready, George? This was highlighted in a infographic that is now on the screen that people can see. This one is coming from a trans-identifying, I think, naval employee saying one of the weirdest things that gives me euphoria is when I pee. I guess that's really exciting to now urinate with your new genitals. That's pretty crazy. Another Navy Intel employee said medical science is going to give me tits one way or another. And some other creeper said, I got groped at a concert, which was fun. I've got pages and pages of these to share, but I'm going to go back to just putting you on the screen here for a second. Talk about maybe the time card nature or the fraud nature of using it outside of the de minimis goal.
When I left NSA, which was a while ago now, so we're talking 15 years. So let's be fair. Things move pretty fast in that world. The level of reporting for what you did during the course of the week for your time card was not as granular as that at the FBI. So at the FBI, you're very specific on what programs, how much time you spent on each, and you put that in each week, and then your supervisor, thumbs up, thumbs down. They may have some questions. They get back with you. But there's an approval process. So every time that these employees have submitted, and I know this is the case, just that what I'm not clear on is the level of granularity for each organization, but each person participating in those chats had to submit a time and attendance record at the end of 2 weeks. So they fraudulently created a document. And then the other question that needs to be answered is well, what level of supervision are they getting if they're spending this inordinate amount of time talking about bathroom proclivities or their sexual activities?
It's a great question. And you had oversight of what? Maybe some SOSs, so some tactically embedded analyst and then some intelligence analyst, the IA position. How much granularity did you have into what they were spending their time on a given basis when you're signing off on their timesheets?
I'll be frank, it was pretty hard for me. I mean, at one point in time when I had the task force, I had 26 direct reports. But I learned this back in the 80s, management by wandering around. You walk around and you talk to each employee and you just show up. Not that you're being sneaky, but you show up at their cubicle, unannounced, and you get a verbal rundown of what they're doing. So when I saw time cards coming in at the end of the week, I was confident that what I saw and what I was approving was accurate.
Yeah,
but I mean, you can't do that hiding out in your office, though.
Well, what if you're on a sex chat? What if you're doing the top secret pervert party from your office? Then it's going to be a lot harder for you to be critical of these people, yeah?
Well, that's the thing, right? So you want to co-opt people and rope them into this? That's the easiest way to do it because now they're dirty too.
Interesting. I think that it'll be very interesting when they start looking
working from.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you can't do this from working from home, though.
That's right.
Just to be clear, you're not going to get access to a top secret enclave.
Some of these things, which we'll read through in a little bit for people to understand, are pretty wild. And like you say, I'm very curious how many supervisory level, whether it's a 13 or 14, I'm sure the agency changes at like what supervisory positions are. But pretty interesting way to spend your day. Let me ask you, just broadly speaking, George, as a former supervisor inside the government, multiple levels, what do you think about asking your folks for 5 bullet points of how you spent your week? How long would it take your people that were doing their job to be able to come up with those bullet points?
It should take a few seconds. I required weekly reports, and I submitted a weekly report, both when I was at the Bureau and at the National Security Agency. And even at the end of a drill weekend, me as the senior enlisted leader for the unit, my CO and I would craft at the end of a drill weekend and fire that up the chain of command, what it is that we did during the course of that drill weekend. So this is, to me, this is unheard of, this level of outrage, telling people what you did. I'm sorry. I know you brought me on to provide some insight, but I can't get my head around that one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, what do you think the outrage is coming from? And then I'll let you go.
people that do nothing. That's where the outrages come from. Like, how dare you ask, what I did during the course of the week? But I want to point out one other thing, Kyle, if I may, and I'll be brief.
Sure.
In 2005, when I joined the National Security Agency, it was all hands on deck, even though it had been, just a little bit over 4 years, less than 4 years since 9/11. They had brought back a number of retired senior former agency personnel. They were called SIRS. I forget what the acronym stands for. A lot of military people like myself that were recruited right out of the GWAT. And it was a very serious organization. And by 2010, when I was leaving, I was having lunch with a gentleman that I worked with who was an awesome dude, another grown adult, former undercover narcotics agent in Baltimore, got stabbed through the hand. Had it not been his hand, it would have been his eyeball. I mean, a very serious man, and we're having lunch and we looked around like, where are all these kids coming from? Mm-hmm. And so we saw that change taking place back in 2010, bringing in all these youngsters. And here we are 15 years down the road, and this is what we have.
Yeah, it turns out that, culture has consequences, I guess, inside a federal agency, right?
Yeah, it's sad, man.
All right, George, thanks for jumping on the phone last minute. Thanks for calling me, even though I was already awake. And do you want to tell people that you're going into the Hair Club for Men appointment that you got going on, or should we keep that on the DL for right now?
You know what? Let's just keep that just between the two of us. We won't let that go. But I appreciate that.
I put a beautiful bald picture of you up on the screen, so anybody who's watching this understands the humor there. Anyway, we're a sick pair.
I don't care if I have terminal cancer and they give me 2 months to live. If they come out with a treatment for baldness, I'm all in.
I know you are. You used to have beautiful hair, you tell me, but that was before I was born, so I don't even try to hurt your feelings with it. Thanks for jumping on, buddy.
Take care.
All right, see ya. Okay, folks. So, yeah, George Hill, outstanding on the phone. You guys can follow him. You see him on the screen right now. If you're watching, if you're listening, you should follow him on X. Make sure you're following him at Senior Chief EXW. That's E as in Echo, X like X-ray, W like whiskey, Senior Chief EXW. A wealth of knowledge, a very sarcastic and snarky guy, and someone who, probably would not have been very keen or kind to those that were participating in the top secret sex pervert parties. You can't help it. Okay, again, we're going to go through some of these things because they're just so ridiculous. And maybe that tells you a little bit about why there's this outrage at Doge. It goes from DOJ, it goes the intel community. Actually, the DOJ tends to sort of lean as like a intel community light because they do the prosecutions for national security stuff. Let me throw some of these chats up on the screen for funsies. So you're just seeing here annotated the agencies that these people are associated with. You've got NSA on there. You've got United States Navy. You've got NGA, the National Geospatial Agency. Okay, they're talking about cover bands, and then you get this one from somebody who is not listed as a specific agency. Says, depends on where you go for the lower body. I went with Milan, which is significantly more expensive. For the face, I paid roughly $1,000 total. We're talking about hair removal here, apparently. That's what's been going on. $1,000 for the chest. These are all laser treatments to be able to make yourself from a male into a female-looking creature by cutting off all of your body hair. $4,000 total, and then it says the lower body includes a full Brazilian and all of that. Getting my butthole lasered was shocking. Zapped by a laser. That's what I think about when I think about the highly trained, highly sophisticated, dedicated public servants that we've been recruiting. We're thinking like, hey, could they be talking about their laser butthole zapping? That'd be really good. You can't make this stuff up. This is also pretty wild. Here's another one. This has got people from the United States Navy, again, NSA, an FBI person dropping in, this male that has decided to go get hormone replacement, talking about growing breasts, and very upset that this person apparently also has an active Twitter account. A friend of mine just got suggested my account by the Twitter algorithm because of my posts having device to do with riots and mass shooter survival, but I think it's criminal that it wasn't for my tits because they're fantastic. This is how you should spend your time working if you're a government employee, right? And then it says, except I don't wear a bra because I don't have enough there yet to require the support. And then the best is you move down a little ways and someone said, yeah, how did your wife respond? Just the creepiest, nastiest stuff. This was originally written again by Chris Rufo and Hannah Grossman, so they put it out in City Journal yesterday. If you guys want to go find the original article, we always want to attribute it to that. And then once again, this is this Intel person saying, medical science is going to give me tits one way or another. My best friend, battle buddy, said, I want proportions that would give me back pain. Other people should enjoy. I want to help other people enjoy experiencing boobs. So all of this stuff, I'm not just being like silly with the sort of spam type title that you guys saw, the clickbait stuff. It's wild. And there's more of it. I'll throw a couple of things on here. One person, and this is probably the weirdest thing. Again, I just wanted to show you the agencies as much as anything else. It's attributed to NRO, which is the National Reconnaissance Office. It's a map making company. NGA, again, that's a National Geospatial Agency. So all of these are sort of in the GeoInt sphere, or geospatial information, geospatial intelligence. So all across the board. And there are many different types of intelligence agencies. Most of you guys probably do not realize that they're out there, mostly because you don't deal with them on a daily basis. And why would you? No big deal. But there are everything from the Air Force Research Laboratories popping up in this, AFRL. It's a nasty mess of kinks and weirdness. And this one you're seeing on the screen here, this person is describing what they, polyamory, I guess, and trying to give people a granular conceptual level of the amount of sexual connections they have with strangers, or I guess not strangers, but non-related partners. So this person says, mine is like a triple bond with a P2, a double bond with a P3. This is some super nerdy stuff. And a P4, who also has a triple bond between each other, double bonds. It goes on and on and on. And then it gets down to an FBI SOS on the top secret enclave saying, I sucked at chemistry back in school. My head is exploding, trying to imagine the chemical bonds with a smiley face and the tongue. Again, all of this is being done with your taxpayer dollars on your taxpayer time. They are doing the thing that they think is probably serving and protecting and providing useful experiences. No wonder these people don't want to talk about what they've spent their day doing. I've got a little bit from Sean Duffy, who is not one of these creeps. He's a man who has 9 children. He seems to be in a loving relationship. Both he and his wife are awesome. I've seen them off camera as well. They're just really, really nice people. A good Catholic family that decided to have a bunch of babies, kind of like in traditional value style. And he's talking about, look, over at Department of Transportation, you should be able to accurately summarize, just the way that George Hill said, you should be able to give me 5 things you did last week. It's a whole week. It's 5 days. If you didn't do one thing in each day that you were at work, what the hell do you do even working here?
I have no problem with the employees here saying, what did you do last week? And if you can't come up with 5 things that you did, maybe you shouldn't be employed here. So again, this is an easy task. It happens in the private sector all the time. And so I wanted our employees to actually engage and talk about what they did. And I think this whole movement, Bill, is potentially going to make people go, I'm going to come to work earlier. I'm going to stay later. I'm going to look at what Donald Trump wants me to accomplish because he won the election. And I'm going to fight and work to make sure I help him accomplish that because I'm a public servant. I don't work for a party or a union or a think tank. I actually work for the president. And again, I think this goes to that point. Just tell us what you did last week.
Okay, so we looked up today's 20.
I like it when a Fox News person also has a verbal stomp. We look, But seriously, how hard would that be? Now, here's something that you're seeing that Donald Trump's cabinet picks change. Because what you keep hearing from the left is that these people serve the American public. And strictly speaking, that's not exactly true if you work for the executive branch. It's something I was acutely aware of, and it's something that it's been obscured over the last couple of years. What we've seen is this idea that you are working on behalf of the American people and therefore accountable to the American people. That'd be kind of like saying if you worked at a company that you were accountable to the shareholders. Maybe ultimately you are, but in reality, you're accountable to your managerial line of command all the way up to a CEO or maybe a board of directors that's running your company. And those people are accountable to the shareholders. At the end of the day, Donald Trump is going to be accountable to the American people and the taxpayers, the voters. Say whatever you want. That's who he is representing, America. But the people that work inside the executive are, in fact, accountable to the executive, as long as the chief executive is obeying the law. It's quite funny. There's been a couple of different articles I've seen, and they've popped up talking about how Donald Trump has decided to stretch the capabilities of the executive, and he is trying to lean on the so-called landmark case, saying that the executive branch has executive authority and is therefore immune from prosecution when they are doing executive things. The idea of qualitative immunity is something that gets people really upset because they don't really understand where it comes from. They get pissed off because cops have the ability to do their job and not be held accountable for it. But the fact of the matter is, if you are doing your job and you are using the authority of the executive, you're empowered to do that. And as long as you're not engaged in criminality, if you're not doing things that are unconstitutional, if you are not making orders that are illegal, I'm leaning here now on the Biden administration where they were making actually illegal orders, which have been adjudicated as such in court. They were coming out and saying, you must do this thing that we don't have the authority to ask you to do. And then we are going to violate federal employment law, which is the basis of the lawsuits that I have. They want you to violate federal employment law in order to accomplish their mission. If you violate the law, you're violating the law regardless of who you are. But if you're telling people to do their job as you've defined their job, as you are their manager, this is not a problem. So you hear Sean Duffy kind of making that pivot. They're talking about how people who work in these different departments are, in fact, theoretically, working on behalf of the president. This is something that is not that foreign, and they certainly act that way when they're in charge, but they don't want to talk about it whenever they're not. So I've got this kind of just outrage fest, which is going on. Again, CNN has been running cover for it. MSNBC has been running cover for it. NBC has been running cover for federal employees who essentially are trying to refuse any accountability to the person that is actually the one that they are accountable to. And that is essentially what the Supreme Court was trying to say. The executive runs the executive because they are the executive. That's what Article 2 is all about. Most of your government is, in fact, not Congress or the judiciary. They're paid for and they are operated by the people that actually do the movement forward, the execution of the mission of the government, which is the executive. It's cleverly named that way. Okay, here's CNN doing some cover. And of course, this woman looks the way that she does. And she's totally not like a partisan hack when you're listening to her.
First, just tell us about this email and what it was like receiving it and what you all have talked about after getting it.
Sure. I got this email Saturday afternoon, about 3 p.m., and I felt absolutely infuriated getting this email with a demand within 48 hours to provide a response on what I did within the last week or face termination. This is clearly an attempt from Elon Musk to harass and bully and intimidate the federal workforce, which is part of his broader plan to gut the federal workforce and privatize public sector services to ensure that corporations like his own can get more profit. And that makes me really angry.
It makes me very angry that I just speculated and I just put a bunch of things onto somebody with no evidence, by the way. Did you hear any evidence that she cited? Did you hear that she was in a position to know what she was talking about? It kind of reminds me of the guy we brought on yesterday, or the clip we played yesterday, where he says, you know, I was a political science major and I studied history. It's like, oh, okay. And based on my studies of like undergraduate history, I'm going to give you this very solid and no evidence, just trust me, bro, and you know, take on trans people being deleted. Well, this is what happens when you let that thing kind of be enabled. Again, we had Sean Duffy a second ago, right? Who was doing that job before Sean Duffy? Pete Buttigieg, who has a quote unquote husband who spent time trying to radicalize kids, who's got pictures of him wearing some weird breast apparatus thing. Why would you not think that's been normalized in the public sector? If you're going to put people that act in, let's just call them sexually deviant ways, they deviate from the norm. I'm not making a moral judgment, although you know I do. But let's just say if you're going to be a sexual deviant, if you're going to deviate from the standard, one or two standard deviations beyond, and try to normalize that and socialize that behavior, it's not crazy that you would see federal employees acting this way and thinking that they are justified in doing so, and then being appalled at asking to account for their time, because some of them are spending their time doing this. Is it all the federal workforce? Of course not. Let's not get out of craziness and, and say, well, this is what everybody in the federal government is doing. I'm sure it's a fairly small percentage, but it's a higher percentage than it should be, because most of you can imagine trying to do this at your workplace and immediately suffering consequences. And these people will be outraged if they lose their job. It comes from a culture of saying that it takes an act of Congress to remove you from your job. That's not strictly speaking true. You can actually very easily violate the terms of your employment and be removed. Or they can find a workaround, like they've done with my friends at the FBI The whistleblowers have all found that all they had to do was actually just pull the security clearance. All of these people, for bad judgment on job, should actually lose their security clearance. I'm actually going to advocate that position. I don't always do that, but like, do you really want these people in charge of your secrets and your national security? I sure as heck don't. Before we get any further into the weeds, let's talk about my friends over at patriot-protect.com/Kyle. Again, it's patriot-protect.com/Kyle. My wife and I were talking last night. I have her stuff all queued up and I haven't submitted it. So she's next up. That's going to be our goal this week, in addition to some thank you notes we have to send off. The problem is you have to ask yourself, what's your safety worth? You've got the government not doing the thing that you thought they were doing. Scammers across the world are crouched over their computer screens trying to find you using Google, and they're searching all the data brokers and all of these websites around the web, trying to figure out where you live, what you do for work, what your phone number is, the names of your family members, so they can call in and try to scam you or steal things from you, set up phony accounts, and so on. If you want to put on digital camouflage, you can do so with patriot-protect.com/Kyle. The question is, how does this thing work? What they do is they go through all of these data broker websites and they scrub off your information. It's scanning and scrubbing over 100 person search and data broker websites across the web, places that scammers can go, where criminals can use to find you. And once they complete it, they continuously monitor to keep your name and your data that you give them. You essentially upload the information you want to be scrubbed. They go looking for it online and find ways to eliminate it. They have a deep sort of like, what do they call it? A search and destroy protocol that goes after this stuff. It's 24/7 protections running all the time in the background. Costs you about $5 a month for an annual subscription. So you guys have to decide, is your safety online worth $5 a month? It's a pretty easy investment to do. And you're going to use that promo code Kyle to be able to save yourself 15%. Again, it's patriot-protect.com/Kyle if you guys want to check into that. And I recommend you find at least something to do to protect yourself. Here's another little good fun story about this. And they're always in these glasses, aren't they? It's bedlam. The federal workers are left in limbo as the clock ticked down. This was yesterday because the deadline was last night at the end of Monday. And here's the crazy thing. I've actually been called into work when I was working for the federal government, not just to send an unclassified email like they were asked to, like, hey, give me the 5 things you spent your time doing. It turns out if your 5 days were 5 days of training in another city, which is what I was doing at the time, or, I took 2 sick days because my kid was sick. So you're not going to be accountable for work on those days, you'd think. You could still come up with a handful of accomplishments for the days you did. I've actually been called back to work, illegally, by the way, something I showed to the Office of Professional Responsibility. I got called in by my worst boss I've ever had in my life. And she wanted to see not just an unclassified email, but a classified update on all of my cases. And I could still provide that. I had to drive in and it was a pain in the butt. But the idea that this would throw these people off is crazy. And then you get the alternative of people who are really doing things that I have no problem with America paying for. Think about the way that we have connectivity in this country. Think about all of the digital ways that we are interacting, whether it be you receiving this podcast, whether it be video service, whether it be the internet that you're getting, whether it be all the cell phone towers and so on. The FCC has guys that are climbing up on this. This is Brandon Carr. He's the FCC chairman. He climbed this tower. It's obviously a publicity stunt, so let's just call it what it is. But he climbed a tower to show what these men do every day. And yes, they're overwhelmingly men. I don't know if there's women doing it, but I don't want women to do this job. For their sake, they climb an 1,800-foot tower. That's 300 feet higher than the low limit for most static line jumps. I've flown in planes and jumped out of planes that were not as high as these damn towers are. It looks absurd, and I highly recommend you guys come into the video of the show. If you're listening, and you're listening on Spotify, just open up the video for a second right around this time. It's about 35 minutes in. Let me just show you how nuts it is to look down. By the way, this is what a static line jump looks like. Absolutely terrifying stuff.
All right, made it to the top with Hassan and his crew. They're swapping out the lighting system up here. Wonderful day with them. America's tower crews get the toughest jobs done. Super grateful for their work.
Look how high they are. He's wearing that freaking GoPro. They've got the entire safety rig up there, and you're just looking down. When you are above the clouds on a man,
all right, made it to the top with
built tower. When you climb up on the damn tower and you can look down and see the clouds below you because there's literally weather below you. Whoa! Those guys have no problem documenting what they did for the last 5 days, right? How hard would it be for them to go out there? It's like, okay, maintain tower on this, did safety checks on there. They put up new lighting. They've got the American flag flying 1,800 feet in the air. I got no problem with that one. It's just mind blowing to me that you had people resisting this thing. And the people that have been running the cover for it has been media. Yesterday, we covered a little bit about Joy Reid and her step down. I've got some tasty clips because I just can't not dwell on this thing. Let's start with this little piece here. There's no audio to this, but I want you to understand the woman that we're talking about who got canceled, because it wasn't obvious to me. I knew she was highly paid. I didn't realize how highly paid she was. Yes, she's crying on the screen right now. This is reported by Newsweek, which is a lefty-leaning source and probably in a position to know. They get a lot of really good, what's the right word, leaks. What was Joy Reid's salary before MSNBC canceled her? It says here, and I've got it highlighted for you. There she is getting a tissue, which we'll see in a second. Reid was one of the most highly paid hosts, earning $3 million a year for hosting The Readout, according to the Washington Free Beacon. However, in late 2024, when they realized that their ratings were garbage, they asked her to take a pay cut, and they cut her salary in half to $1.5 million a year. There are reports that the woman who is going to be talking about this, whose name is Rachel Maddow, makes as much as $30 million in her contract. I'm not exactly sure if that's 30 a year. That sounds way too high, but what the hell? What do I know? These people make money that has nothing to do with the value of what they're providing. Here is a little bit of the value that she's providing. Let me go ahead and see if I've got the... Let me see. We've got this on here somewhere. 1 second. Oh, here it is. Joy Reid mashup. Ready, go.
There's a thing about both white vigilantism and white tears, particularly male white tears. Really white tears in general, because that's what Karens are, right? They Karen out, and then as soon as they get caught, it's like, Green Waterworks. White men can get away with that too, and it has the same effect.
My show had value, and that, that what I was doing had value. And in the end, I try not to cry on TV.
She tried not to cry on TV, but she did cry on TV. And then as like her staff brought her a little tissue while she was acting here. I was looking for the Rachel Maddow clip, and I'm just going to share you guys something kind of funny. If you saw my eyes searching frantically all over the screen, because I have a cheat sheet of it says like what I've got on each one of these clips. Clip number 9, which is what I have queued up right now, is Rachel Maddow. I had to go look for it visually because I listed it as Mark Cuban is an effing racist. That was the name of the clip. I hid it from myself. Here's Rachel Maddow, who definitely doesn't look anything. She's not wearing the glasses, so she looks a little bit less Mark Cuban like when she doesn't have the glasses. This woman is going to tell you, I think, now you guys read between the lines with me. It sounds like she's saying MSNBC is full of racists. Could it be? And is she going to vacate her seat so that a woman of color can take over? Because it sounds like she might want to do that too, to be able to be consistent with her principles. Or is the money too good? Is the principles only in word and they just are virtue signals? We'll see.
PM hour, all the other nights except for Mondays. So that's a big change. An even bigger programming change is at 7 p.m. 7 p.m. Eastern, where Joy Reid's show, The Readout, ended tonight. And Joy is not taking a different job in the network. She is leaving the network altogether. And that is very, very, very hard to take. I am 51 years old. I have been gainfully employed since I was 12. And I have had so many different kinds of jobs, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. But in all of the jobs I have had, in all of the years I have been alive, there is no colleague for whom I have had more affection and more respect than Joy Reid. I love everything about her. I have learned so much from her. I have so much more to learn from her. I do not want to lose her as a colleague here at MSNBC. And personally, I think it is a bad mistake to let her walk out the door. It is not my call, and I understand that, but that's what I think. I will tell you, it is also unnerving to see that on a network where we've got two non-white hosts in primetime, both of our non-white hosts in primetime are losing their shows, as is Katie Fang on the weekend. And that feels worse than bad, no matter who replaces them.
Yeah, I mean, it feels bad when you hire people who are racist and then you fire them because nobody wants racism in America in 2025. If you can't read the tea leaves, that would be very, very upsetting. I could see why she would be upset about that. You know who's not going to get fired, although may not get invited back for a little while, as they realize that, like, Scott Jennings has been basically crushing it over at CNN and reaching across the aisle and saying things that are inherently true. God forbid they bring this guy back. His name's Danny Cervello. He's a legal analyst giving a little bit of a take on MSNBC of all places. So this is the Rachel Maddow thing. If you did more of this, people would turn in and go like, oh, this is useful. How about non-emotional, non-racially charged, not insinuating that your network is inherently racist because they're getting rid of the two lowest performing primetime hosts? By the way, was it just me, or could Rachel Maddow at $30 million a year, maybe reduced to $25 million a year? She could literally pay chump change, like a rounding error. She could actually pay Joy Reid to stay or to be on something else that she does together. They could have a collab. They could still be colleagues if they wanted. She could bring her underneath and not even notice that she lost some of that salary. Just saying. Here's Danny Cervello giving like a real honest take. This is what news used to do, but what he's doing is he's dialing back the extremism. And there's no market for this on the hard left. They don't want to hear reality. They want to hear Rachel Maddow talking about how many jobs she's had and how racist everybody is, so they can all go like, yeah, God, everyone is so racist. We are not racist, but everybody else, super duper racist. Meanwhile, I'm going to go back to my government job and talk about getting my boob job or getting my butthole lasered. Like, I just can't get over this stuff. Okay, this is what they don't want. You know, like sensible, honest takes like, hey, lawfare just takes a long time. And by the way, Trump's going to win some.
Over the weekend, I read all these headlines, and the headlines were like, Trump suffers legal blows. Another one was Trump get hit with unexpected loss. Here was one, major DEI legal setback. And I think the concern I have is that people watching those headlines, especially people who don't like Trump, are going to think Trump is getting his butt kicked. And then when he wins, invariably, he's going to win some of these cases. They're going to say, well, what happened to all the butt kicking, right? Yeah. And here's why. These are not major setbacks. First reason, we are at the stay stage. In other words, in almost all of these cases, the court is issuing a stay. That is a pause. By definition, it is not on the merits. Nobody's winning or losing on the merits. They're hitting the pause button until they can decide the case on the merits. And by the way, just like Danielle said, all of this is exhibition games or friendlies, as they say in soccer. Yeah. They don't count. They don't count until they get to the last court they get to, which in most cases, because they're of unique constitutional issues, is going to be the Supreme Court. So these are not blows to the Trump administration. I don't see them that way. The other thing, and again, Danielle brought this up, the Trump administration totally expects they're going to lose in court a lot. Do you know what it costs to do an executive order? A piece of paper and a Sharpie. That's it. And they can go right back to the drawing board. One of these courts said, hey, the language was too vague. You know what that tells them? Just go draft another one. It's not like legislation where you need a bunch of people to agree on something. It is a pen and a piece of paper, and that's it.
Did you see how uncomfortable the other people sitting at that table were when somebody started just dropping, like, not opinionated editorials and feelings and emoting all over the screen? He's just like, look, factually, like, all he needs to do is sign this stuff off. Do you know where Donald Trump, and let's call it like the MAGA group, learned this move? They learned it from guys like Barack Obama, who said, I've got a pen and I've got a phone and I can make things happen unilaterally. If you want a unilateral executive, if you want the president to act like a king, which they seem to be like fixating on right now, I hear the word king just thrown out all over the place. If you want that, then just keep having your presidents act like kings. What's good for the goose has been good for the gander. And people are going to come in and make sweeping changes in the executive because the executive has been given too much power. This is something that happened long before Donald Trump got there. He was not the cause of it. This is the same situation that Mitch McConnell said. If you end up breaking the process, you will rule the day, because the American people are a fickle lot. We don't just look at everything and say, oh, well, that's how it is. That's how it'll always be. At some point, people go, nah, you guys kind of suck. Gas prices are high, and you laid off all these oil pipeline workers, and you started making bad decisions for the country. Let's try the other guy. Let's see what he's got. We kind of like to dance around between these things. You know, like one of these polyamorous groups, except we just do it with our own wives and our own families that we lock together on. And then when it comes to politics, we're not stuck in any idea. We have bloodless revolutions every 2 to 4 years. That's just how it's supposed to work. It's not that crazy. Speaking of revolutions, speaking of bloodless, if you guys want to continue to protect your own rights, you own weapons so you don't have to use them. That's one of the reasons to do it. And you get to train with them because they're super fun and cool. Why don't you guys check out my buddies over at Shield Arms? They make things that other people want to ban. They turn magazines into higher capacity magazines because they've better sort of improved upon the designs of the originals, including things like Glock. My buddies were telling me when I was at SHOT, again, at shieldarms.com, promo code Kyle saves you 5 to 10% depending on what you're buying. Shield Arms, when we were talking to them at SHOT Show, I'm talking to one of their sales guys, and he goes, dude, every single Glock representative, all the sales guys for Glock that go around the country and sell Glock to police departments and to large stores, they all own our magazines. They don't buy Glock magazines because the Glock magazines hold 10 in a 43X, for example, which is a really good carry gun. That's what I carry. The Shield Arms magazines hold 15. You can add 50% capacity simply by upgrading your magazine. It's the best way to improve the capability. And look, you're always going to want more rounds. Nobody is getting into a situation and being like, man, I wish I was carrying less rounds when things got spicy. Shieldarms.com, promo code Kyle. Check them out. Good people making great firearms in Montana, America. Every time I deal with those guys, like they're just good Christian people. They gave me a t-shirt that says faith over fear. Also really useful. It's a good time for that right now. Let's go back a little bit in time. Let's remember, this is Donald Trump's speech from CPAC the other day, reminding people why they got this. Why is MSNBC on the ropes? And I'll show you, we got some other funny news coming from NBC specifically as well. Why are they on the ropes? Maybe because they were doing things Americans didn't like that regular people thought was kind of absurd. Not as absurd as like butthole lasers in NSA top secret pervert chats, but pretty absurd. You know, like spending your money on people that don't actually come from this country and get to stay in luxury hotels.
4 long years, you had a president who put illegal aliens up in penthouse suites in beautiful hotels on Park Avenue, on Madison Avenue, or on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. Now you have a president who is stamping their ticket to Gitmo on a one-way trip back to the places from which they came. Wonderful places. Big difference.
Yeah, big difference. What a difference just like 5 weeks has made. Lester Holt is also stepping down while we're talking about media, stepping down as the anchor for NBC Nightly News. I was not sure where to put this headline, by the way, you're seeing on the screen. Lester Holt has about an 11 head. Some of you are familiar with a 4 head. I've got a 4 or a 5 head. I've got like a little bit more of a widow's peak going right now. Years and years of having a larger forehead than some. Lester Holt's forehead basically goes back to the top of the crown of his skull, which is really impressive. So I wasn't sure where to put the title of this. But the fact is he's stepping down after a number of years, and you got to think that Donald Trump's presidency has something to do with it. It also has to do with his appetite, that people are sick of it. They don't want to be lied to. They don't want people to present propaganda in the same way. So here's kind of a fun little thing. 100% propaganda. 60 Minutes is like well-baked propaganda. And this one is a story that we touched on a little bit yesterday. We're going to play it in their own words today. It's Scott Pelley, who thinks of himself as being the voice of Scott Pelley. Here he is doing a ridiculous narration of absurdities for these people who claim that they were fired for doing their job. Again, we're going to get a little deeper into that in 1 second. I think we talked about it yesterday, but I wanted to get their own voices involved. Here's a very bookish-looking lady who used to be an assistant United States attorney.
The Justice Department is under attack. They're coming after the people that want to uphold the law as it exists. And that should be terrifying to everyone.
Sarah Levine and Sean Brennan were federal prosecutors on the Justice Department's biggest investigation, the attack on the Capitol, until they were fired by the Trump administration January 31st. Why were you fired?
Because I did my job. I mean, it's really that simple. I went in, I followed the facts, I followed the law, and I got fired because I did exactly what I was supposed to.
Well, that's not exactly what happened there. And so here at 60 Minutes, we're going to tell you exactly what it did do. What happened was she was hired in a probationary status to complete the work on a case that is no longer being prosecuted, and therefore her services are no longer required. You see how that works? How many of you have ever worked in a contracted position? How many of you have ever worked yourself out of a job? We talked about it the other day. I worked at a restaurant. They sold the restaurant. I didn't work at the restaurant anymore. It's really simple. Some new management team came in. Some of you have worked on contracts where you literally were working yourself out of a job. Let's say you're building a house and you got hired on a crew to build said house, or maybe another construction site. You were building a building and then the building was built and then you had to go find another job. You got fired for doing your job too well. Yeah, or that, or you were just sort of like violating every principle that the DOJ is supposed to have, which is that Lady Justice pulled down the blindfold, looked at who they were going after and said, aha, MAGAs, we're going to get them. We're going to waste time and money and resources, and we're not going to do the thing like national security. The butthole laser people got that covered. We're going to just go after like grandmothers and a bunch of people who are trespassing. I'm going to make the argument to you now. I made it to Joe Biggs. I've said it to Stuart Rhodes. I've said it to various J6ers, and nobody seems to be too upset about it. If the DOJ and the FBI as the investigative arm spent all of the J6 money that they did only going after people that got physically violent with cops and broke American property, if they just went after the people that were destroying windows, even if it was less fair than what happened, because a lot of people got away with that in 2020 from the BLM and Antifa riots, assuming that they only went after people that were physically violent with law enforcement and did demonstrably negative property impacts, property damage on federal property, it would have been fine. You would not have had a single bit of outrage. People would have been like, yeah, don't do that. FAFO. Don't be a dick. And you were. Instead, they spent our money on doing their political agenda. It was the definition of what weaponization is. And nobody knows more about weaponization than this guy who used to work for the agency that I worked for. He was the boss of the field office when I showed up. He became the deputy director, a position that Dan Bongino is stepping into. And then he was the acting director for a little while. He's got 3 reasons why Dan Bongino should not be at the FBI. I've got 3 rebuttals after that. So let's listen to Andy McCabe for a minute. For those of you that don't like looking at effeminate men, close your eyes. We're going to play probably 60 seconds of him.
Here's 3 reasons why Dan Bongino is a terrible pick for the FBI. First, he has no experience in the FBI at all, but now he'll be responsible for all of its intelligence collection and investigative operations. That's going to be hard to do when you don't even know how the organization works. 2, Bongino has shown the FBI workforce through his many statements on his podcast and in other places over the last few years that he doesn't respect them and he has very little faith in the work that they do. And 3, I've talked to a lot of FBI people in the last couple of weeks. There's no question that morale in the organization is at an all-time low. Bongino needs that workforce to step up and accomplish the mission, but it will be hard to motivate them when they think their own leadership is out to get them. Bottom line, if Bongino fails, the FBI will fail, and that will make all of us less safe.
Yeah, well, that's true, isn't it? Oh, unless those people are spending their time on the yellow side, up on the top secret enclaves while they're talking about their butthole lasers, and that would not be a good thing. We can't have those people lose a job. A couple reasons on Andy McCabe that we can talk about. Number 1, Andy McCabe was not a great example of an FBI agent. He was a classic FBI manager. Those people basically get the less case experience than Steve Friend had. Then they move into management and spend like a decade and a half to 2 decades not doing the work that the FBI does at the front line, and they're completely disconnected from it. That's why they go to things called executive shoots, because they can't actually do the job of carrying a gun and doing the thing that FBI agents are expected to be proficient at. You know, fitness, being able to shoot, being able to move, being able to communicate, being able to build cases, because they're not doing that. Also, Andy McCabe got fired from his agency for lying to his agency. You know, the cardinal sin in the FBI is not actually doing anything other than embarrassing the FBI. He actually committed the same cardinal sin that they've accused the Suspendables of. The difference is his was a felony. And ours was bringing information to Congress, which is actually protected under U.S. law and U.S. code. And then lastly, just on a personal level, any man who wears a crew neck collar underneath his V-neck sweater, he should not be in charge. You make bad decisions at getting dressed. Apparently, you also make bad decisions in your sexual proclivities because, like so many other senior executives, there are allegations that Andy McCabe was also involved with Lisa Page. You might remember her for also being involved with Peter Strzok because these people make bad decisions with their genitals. They've normalized sexual deviancy, and it is across the board. There are, like I said, there are literally dozens of examples of senior FBI executives getting involved with their compromising sexual preferences, whether it be infidelity or other things. The current or the previous DD who just stepped out, one of the pieces on our little slideshow that I alluded to talking to Benny Johnson yesterday is Deputy Director Harem, because there's actually supposedly a harem of women that were sleeping with the former Deputy Director of the FBI. They don't have a real great track record, it turns out. Again, Andy McCabe fired for lying. The previous guy actually retired and then got himself reinstated. And one of the things that we were being told by sources inside the FBI is that he was reaching out in order to get an alternate federal ID to buy a house in a real name of a fake ID that the government would help him get against every law and every single sort of code of conduct you could imagine for his subordinate girlfriend who was pregnant, who he should have never been having a relationship. And it's antithetical to basically everything that the federal government stands for. Lastly, I'm going to just remind you of this guy. Some people will know the name Mark Felt. Mark Felt was also known as Deep Throat. Mark Felt, there's actually a movie poster that you're seeing right there. They made an entire movie taking down the president. He was a deputy director under Hoover and was instrumental in getting rid of Nixon. He was later convicted of lying and improperly prosecuting Weather Underground, did things against the code. And then the best part of that is that he got pardoned by Ronald Reagan. You don't hear a lot about that. And when you do the portrayal of him, you have Liam Neeson, someone very serious, who goes out there and makes him look like some kind of a hero because he brought down Nixon, who, of course, is a dirty, dirty, bad person. At this point, Nixon would be basically a hero compared to the villains that are working in the federal government. I've got kind of a lighthearted little look on this. Some of us are old enough to remember this movie, which was one of my favorites. It was always really good. I live not too far from where they actually shot this movie. This was supposed to be based on people who worked for a company called Dell Incorporated or Dell Computers. I actually worked at Dell for about 1.5 years, and I can assure you the culture is very similar. In fact, most people who worked in office jobs in the late 90s, early to late 90s, and also into the early 2000s had an experience that was kind of like Office Space. What's funny is, in all the era of Doge and all of these people that are now discovering like what it's all about, they're actually starting to see kind of what it was that we used to talk about the office job. Federal jobs are very Office Space-like. And so people are rediscovering this movie, which still holds up because it wasn't shot on like a high production value. It was just people who were working in their jobs in a miserable way and having really crappy bosses, which is essentially the standard. Here we go.
Terrific. I'm Bob Slidell. This is my associate, Bob Porter.
Oh, hi, Bob. Bob?
Pretty much go ahead and grab a seat and join us for a minute or two. You see, what we're actually trying to do here is we're trying to get a feel for how people spend their day at work. So if you would you walk us through a typical day for you?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I generally come in at least 15 minutes late. I use the side door. That way Lumberg can't see me. And after that, I just sort of space out for about an hour.
Space out?
Yeah, I just stare at my desk. But it looks like I'm working. I do that for probably another hour after lunch, too. I'd say in a given week, I probably only do about 15 minutes of real, actual work.
Peter, would you be a good sport and indulge us and just tell us a little more?
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you something about TPS reports.
For those of you who know, you know. If you know what the PCS load letter means, you know, okay? And if you don't, go watch Office Space. You guys will be enlightened for it. So with all of that kind of screwery going on, it's kind of no wonder that people are getting more excited about seeing a little bit rougher version of the government. Tom Homan had a little speech that he did at CPAC. This is something that kind of impacted me. I'm going to give you a compare and contrast. There are cities out there that have decided they are not accountable to the people that actually live in them. Tom Homan's going to try to remind them of something else. Here he is addressing the commissioner of police for Boston, which is the place where George Hill at least spends some of his time. And George told me if there was ever a city that needed Hill to come with him, it would be Boston.
Police Commissioner of Boston. You said you doubled down on not helping the law enforcement officers of ICE. I'm coming to Boston. I'm bringing hell with me. I looked at the numbers this morning. I stopped counting at 9. 9 child rapists that were in jail in Massachusetts. But rather than honoring an ICE detainer, released them back into the street. You're not a police commissioner. Take that badge off your chest, put it in the desk drawer, because you became a politician. You forgot what it's like to be a cop.
Real simple. Don't we want our law enforcement to do law enforcement? Don't we want our intelligence community to be looking for threats and not for butthole lasers? And don't we want people to just be doing the job that we had them do? I'm going to give you a compare and contrast as we wrap up here. This is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis talking about taxation is theft. I don't know how this guy keeps coming up with these brilliant ideas. It's almost like he just follows like libertarian chats on X. But this is the chat that I want government workers to talk about. Hey, if you have to pay property taxes on a house that you already own, don't you just rent that from the government? We've all been talking about this for years. Anybody who hates taxes or thinks that these things are not actually getting your value worth. And Ron DeSantis is saying that quiet part out loud. I'm going to give you the contrast of what happens if you do the opposite in Portland in 1 second.
Subject their citizens to higher taxes, such as higher property taxes, to pay for these spending habits. And, you know, these property taxes, it's like you buy a home, you buy land, you know, maybe you buy the home outright, but maybe you pay off a mortgage over 30 years. And then, okay, you've paid off the mortgage, you bought the land, you've been taxed many times. It's like, is it your property or not? Just for being on your property, you got to write a check to the government every year. So you're basically paying rent to the government to live on your own property. And our homestead exemption is not strong enough to help these folks because the property gets assessed so high. And that's the thing.
He goes on to explain property assessments, which continue to climb, that whenever they need more money locally, they just go ahead and raise your assessment, and then you're going to have to pay more money on the thing that you theoretically own. You're paying rent to the government. Hey, I want to see what he does on this, just like you guys do. If you're new to the chat, this is what our chat looks like. Thanks for all of you who've joined us on X. Thanks for who are joining us on YouTube. And, of course, our Rumble chat, which is the best. Let me give you what happens if you don't pay attention to the responsibilities you have as a federal government employee or as a local government employee. If you make policies that are antithetical to actually doing the work that people expect you to do, you end up in something called an urban death spiral or a doom loop. And here is local Portland news assessing that Portland might be going down the tubes. It might actually go bankrupt and insolvent very, very shortly. Enjoy this little kind of moment of we know, dude. That's why we don't live there.
An urban doom loop is basically when businesses close, people move out of a city, and then in turn tax revenue goes down, which causes more businesses to close and then really creates a vicious cycle. Economists warn this is where Portland is headed after a report from the Portland Metro Chamber that report shows Multnomah County and Portland are losing people and high-paying jobs. The population in Multnomah County has been on decline for several years. The report says in 2023, the county lost more than 5,000 residents after losing more than 10,000 each year in 2021 and 2022. And high-paying jobs are leaving the county too. In 2024, there were 6,700 jobs lost in the information, financial, and professional services sector.
Oops, probably not a good idea. They also were 81 out of 82 of likely places that you should invest your money as a business, which means they were at the bottom of the list. Folks, you can follow us on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. You can find us on X at Kyle Seraphin and KyleSeraphin.com if you want the locals channel, if you want to get part of the community. Otherwise, find us on Spotify. If you're sick of pop-up ads, wherever you're listening, check it out over there. We'd really appreciate the download there. I will give you a palate cleanser. You guys know that I've got something for you, and this one is extra special. If you're bored and you got $30 burning a hole in your pocket, maybe you want to go and have fun at Home Depot the way that this guy did. He's demonized by this reporter. Again, nobody cares what this reporter says. It actually makes it even funny. So enjoy the delicious leftist crying tears of a guy at CPAC finding what he refers to as the worst of the people at CPAC. And maybe get yourself a jacket that says ICE on it.
Do you actually work for ICE?
No, not at all. Nope.
Explain the outfit.
It's $29.99 on Amazon. I would recommend buying a small if you're my size. This one's a little too loose for my liking. But yeah, if you want some entertainment, wear this and go to a Home Depot in a sanctuary city like where I live right now, Washington, D.C., and you'll see all the illegals. Not all of them, but you can maybe see a lot of them start to run away, and you feel like a group fitness instructor. It's really good.
And you actually think that's funny?
I think it's hilarious. Absolutely. What's not funny is them illegally...
There you have it, everybody.
Oh, he's really, really upset. He wasn't. What's not funny is that they broke into our country and nobody was doing anything about it. So if you want to be a group fitness instructor as well, get yourself a nice jacket. Apparently they're $30. You're not impersonating a federal agent if you tell people you're not a federal agent when you do it. But you could say that in English and they may not understand it. All right, that's it. God bless you guys. Stick around for the American Radicals podcast. If you're over on Rumble, we'll jump you right in. Otherwise, find them online at AmRadPod. See you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.